The family meeting was called for Sunday afternoon, which should have been my first warning. Dad only convened family meetings when he'd already made a decision and wanted to present it as a democratic process. I sat on Mom's floral couch, coffee in hand, watching my brother Eric pace near the fireplace with that self-satisfied expression he wore when things were going his way. "Thank you all for coming," Dad began, standing like he was addressing a board meeting. "We need to discuss the downtown apartment situation." The downtown apartment. The two-bedroom unit at 1247 Westbrook that had been in our family since Grandpa purchased the building in 1987. I'd been living there for 4 years, paying utilities and a small monthly fee to the family trust that technically owned it. "Eric and Shannon are expecting their first child," Dad continued. "They need more space than their current one-bedroom can provide. Meanwhile, Cassie, you have 2 bedrooms all to yourself." I set down my coffee. "I use the second bedroom as a home office. I work remotely 3 days a week." "You can work from a coffee shop," Mom interjected. "Young people do that all the time." "Eric has a family starting," Dad pressed on. "The apartment makes more sense for them. We've decided you'll move out by the end of the month. That gives you 4 weeks to find something else." "You've decided," I repeated. "The family has decided," Dad corrected. "What's best for everyone." Eric finally spoke up. "Come on, Cass. Don't make this difficult. You're single, no kids, good job. You can rent anywhere. Shannon and I need the space for the nursery, and we can't afford market rate for a 2-bedroom. And I can." "You make more than we do," Shannon said from her spot next to Eric. "Eric told me about your salary. You're doing fine." The fact that Eric had discussed my salary, which he'd only guessed at, with his wife made my jaw clench. My finances aren't up for family discussion. "When it affects family resources, they are," Dad said firmly. "The apartment belongs to the family trust. Your grandfather intended it to serve the family's needs. Right now, Eric and Shannon need it most." "Did anyone check what Grandpa actually wrote in the trust documents?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Your father manages the trust. He knows what's appropriate. I'd still like to see the actual documents." "Cassie, don't be difficult." Dad's voice had that warning edge. "This is already decided. Eric and Shannon will move in November 1st. You need to make arrangements." I stood up. "I'd like to formally request copies of the trust documents, the building deed, and any paperwork establishing the family's authority to terminate my residency." Dad's face reddened. "You don't need paperwork. I'm telling you as your father and as the trust manager. Then as the current resident, I'm requesting formal documentation of this eviction." "It's not an eviction." Mom's voice pitched higher. "It's family helping family. Then there should be documentation of the terms." I left the meeting with my family's irritation following me out the door. By the time I got home to the apartment they wanted to take from me, I had 17 text messages in the family group chat, ranging from Eric calling me selfish to Mom saying I was breaking her heart. I ignored them all and opened my filing cabinet. 4 years ago, when Grandpa had gotten sick, he'd called me to the hospital. Not the whole family, just me. He'd been lucid despite the pain medication, and very specific about what he wanted to tell me. "The apartment building," he'd said, gripping my hand. "I'm changing the trust structure. Your father thinks he controls everything, but he doesn't read the details. Never has. Grandpa, you should rest. Listen. The building goes to you. Direct transfer effective on my death. I've already filed the paperwork. Your father will get the other properties, but 1247 Westbrook is yours. He'll think it's still in the family trust because he won't read the amended documents. But it's not. It's yours." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who asked me what I actually wanted instead of telling me what you thought I should do. Because you visited every week, not just when you needed something. Because I trust you to take care of it properly." He died 2 weeks later. I'd received the amended trust documents and the deed transfer from his attorney a month after that. The building, all 6 units including the one I lived in, was mine. Sole ownership, no family trust involved. I'd never told my family because Grandpa had been right. Dad had never read the amended documents. He'd filed away the attorney's letters assuming they were standard estate paperwork. For 4 years he'd believed he controlled the building while I quietly managed it, maintained it, and collected rent from the other 5 units. The rental income covered the building's expenses and then some. I'd used the surplus to update the units, improve the building systems and build a healthy maintenance reserve. The building that Grandpa had bought for $340,000 in 1987 was now worth $2.1 million. And my family wanted to evict me from my own property. Monday morning I called my attorney, Patricia Chin. I'd hired her 3 years ago when I started taking my property ownership seriously. Updating leases, ensuring proper insurance, making everything legally bulletproof. Patricia, I need your advice. My family is trying to evict me from my own building. She listened to the story then laughed. A sharp professional sound. Do they know you own it? They think it's in a family trust managed by my father. And your father has what documentation showing his authority? None that's valid. Grandpa transferred the building to me directly 4 years ago. It's been solely in my name since then. Then this is simple. They have no authority to evict you. They don't own the property, they can't terminate your residency, and if they try to force you out, they're in violation of landlord-tenant law, except they're not even landlords. They're planning to move in November 1st. They're already packing my things. They're packing your things? Patricia's voice sharpened. In your apartment? Without permission. I haven't been home to see, but my brother texted that he's helping me get started on packing. That's illegal entry and possibly theft. Cassie, I need you to be very clear about what you want here. Do you want to educate your family, or do you want to establish firm legal boundaries? I thought about Eric discussing my salary with Shannon. About Dad making unilateral decisions and calling them family consensus. About Mom dismissing my work needs. About 4 years of managing this building invisibly while they all assumed Dad was in charge. Firm legal boundaries, I said. Then here's what we're going to do. Wednesday afternoon my phone started ringing. Dad, then Eric, then Mom. I let them go to voicemail. The messages were variations on a theme. What is this legal letter? Why are lawyers involved? How could you do this to family? The letter Patricia had sent was straightforward. Notice that Cassie Morrison was the sole legal owner of the property at 1247 Westbrook, that no other party had authority to make occupancy decisions, and that any attempt to remove her belongings or change her locks would be treated as illegal eviction and theft, with appropriate legal action to follow. She'd also sent a cease and desist to Eric specifically, regarding his unauthorized entry into my apartment. Building security had confirmed that he'd used Mom's old emergency key to enter 3 times over the past week. Thursday morning, the family meeting was reconvened, this time in Dad's home office, with the mood considerably less confident. Explain this, Dad said, sliding Patricia's letter across his desk. The building is mine. Grandpa transferred it to me before he died. I've owned it for 4 years. That's impossible. The trust was amended. You received copies of the amended documents in 2020. You didn't read them. Dad's face went through several colors. Your grandfather wouldn't cut me out like that. He didn't cut you out. You received the other 3 properties, the commercial building downtown, the duplex on Riverside and the strip mall in Oakmont. I received 1247 Westbrook. Check your trust documents. I watched him pull out a file folder, then another, flipping through papers with increasing agitation. Mom stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. The amendment says. Mom's voice trailed off. The residential building at 1247 Westbrook Avenue is transferred to Cassandra Morrison, effective immediately upon the death of Harold Morrison. Why wouldn't you tell us? Eric demanded. Grandpa asked me not to. He said Dad wouldn't read the paperwork anyway, and he was right. For 4 years, you've all assumed the building was in a family trust while I've been managing it, maintaining it, paying all the expenses and collecting rent. Rent. Dad looked up sharply. The other 5 units are rented. Have been the entire time. That's how I pay for building maintenance, property taxes, insurance, and improvements. You've been collecting money from family property. From my property, I corrected. My building, my rental income, my responsibility. Shannon spoke up. But we need that apartment. The baby. There are other 2-bedroom apartments available in the city. I can provide you with a list of comparable properties if you'd like. We can't afford market rate. That's not my problem. Eric slammed his hand on the desk. This is bullshit. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted this. Grandpa specifically wanted this. He wanted me to have this building. He put it in writing, filed it legally, and made sure I understood the responsibility. What he didn't want was for it to be treated as a family resource to be redistributed at will. So you're just going to keep it all for yourself? Mom's voice was thick with tears. I'm going to continue managing my property as I have been. If you'd like to rent one of the other units, you can submit an application like any other tenant. Rent from my own daughter, Dad said bitterly. Rent from the property owner who happens to be your daughter. There's a waiting list, but I can move family to the front if you're serious. How much? Eric asked. Market rate. 2-bedroom units in that building go for $2,400 a month. That's insane. That's the market. And honestly, that's below market for the area. I keep my rents slightly lower because I prefer stable, long-term tenants. Dad was still processing, his legal mind working through the implications. You've been managing this building for 4 years. The rental income, you should have been sharing that with the family. Why? It's my building. I pay all the expenses, handle all the maintenance, deal with all the tenant issues. Why would I share the income from property I own and manage? Because we're family. Being family doesn't create financial obligations, Dad. You got 3 properties in the inheritance. I got 1. You don't share the rental income from your properties with me. He didn't have an answer to that. Friday morning brought a new complication. I arrived home from a coffee meeting to find Eric in my apartment. Again, this time with boxes. What are you doing? He looked up, defiant. Helping you pack. Since you're being stubborn about this, Shannon and I decided we're moving in anyway. You can either leave peacefully or we'll make it difficult. Eric, you need to leave. Now. Or what? You'll call Dad? He agrees with me. No. I'll call the police. You're trespassing in my private residence. You can't have me arrested. I'm your brother. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Hi, I need to report a trespassing in progress. My brother has illegally entered my apartment and is refusing to leave. Eric's confidence faltered. Cassie, don't be ridiculous. The dispatcher confirmed officers were on the way. I stayed in the doorway, blocking Eric's exit with the boxes he'd packed. When the police arrived 12 minutes later, Eric tried to explain that this was a family misunderstanding, and the apartment was supposed to be his. The officers looked at my lease agreement, my building ownership documents, and the prior cease and desist letter regarding Eric's unauthorized entries. Sir, you need to leave the premises now. If you return without the owner's explicit permission, you'll be arrested for trespassing. After Eric left, humiliated and furious, one of the officers turned to me. You might want to consider a restraining order if this continues. I'm hoping it won't come to that. But I also changed my locks that afternoon and notified building security that Eric and my parents were no longer authorized for building access. The weekend brought a flurry of family drama. Aunts and uncles were calling, having heard various versions of the story. Some supported me. Aunt Linda outright laughed and said Grandpa had always known exactly what he was doing. Others thought I was being selfish, keeping a whole building to myself while family members struggled. Monday morning, Patricia called. We have a situation. Your father filed a petition to contest the property transfer. He's claiming your grandfather was unduly influenced or mentally incompetent when he amended the trust. Grandpa was completely lucid. His attorney documented everything. I know. And we have medical records, the attorney's notes, and the timeline showing the amendment was filed months before his health deteriorated. Your father's case is weak, but it will be expensive and time-consuming to defend. Do it anyway. The court process took 3 months. During that time I didn't speak to my parents or Eric. Shannon sent a few apologetic texts, but I kept them brief and professional. The family split into factions. Some believing Dad's narrative that I'd manipulated a dying old man, others recognizing that Grandpa had been sharp until the very end and had made his own choice. The judge's ruling came down on a Tuesday morning. I was in court with Patricia when Judge Morrison, no relation, read his decision. The evidence clearly shows that Harold Morrison was of sound mind when he amended his trust documents. The medical records, attorney testimony, and timeline all support this. The amendment was properly filed and executed. The current ownership of 1247 Westbrook Avenue by Cassandra Morrison is legally valid and will remain unchanged. Petition dismissed. Dad stood up trying to argue. The judge cut him off. Mr. Morrison, your father made his wishes clear. He chose to distribute his assets in the manner he saw fit. The fact that you disagree with his choices doesn't invalidate them. This court will not overturn a clearly valid estate decision simply because it's not what you expected. Outside the courthouse, Dad tried one more time. Cassie, this is tearing the family apart. No, Dad. Your refusal to accept Grandpa's decision is tearing the family apart. I didn't create this situation. Grandpa did, and he had his reasons. What reasons? What did I do that was so wrong? You never asked him what he wanted. You told him what he should do, what made sense, what was logical. You managed his affairs without consulting him. Just like you tried to manage my housing situation without consulting me. I was trying to do what's best for everyone. You were trying to control outcomes. Grandpa wanted someone who would listen, not someone who would dictate. That's why he chose me. The following week, Eric and Shannon found a different apartment. Smaller than mine, farther from downtown, but theirs. Mom slowly started speaking to me again, though the conversations were strained. Dad remained angry, convinced I'd stolen his inheritance despite the court's clear ruling. But the building remained mine. I continued managing it, keeping the units well maintained, the tenants happy, and the property appreciating in value. 2 years later, when one of the 2-bedroom units became vacant, I offered it to Eric and Shannon at a family rate, $2,000 instead of the market $2,600. They declined, too proud to rent from me. That was their choice, just as keeping my building was mine. They'd started packing my things without asking, not knowing I owned the building. The sheriff had knocked at 9 a.m. sharp, not to evict me but to escort Eric out when he'd trespassed. And the judge had called it exactly right. Grandpa's wishes were clear, legal, and final. The apartment they tried to give away was never theirs to give. And now everyone knew it.